This morning, we're fortunate to have my guest. His name is Kevin Bupp. Kevin is based in Florida. He's a real estate investor. He's also a podcaster. He's got two podcasts, Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow and Mobile Home Park Investing podcast. He's an extensive, I'll let him tell you about all of his investments because he's got an extensive history, and I'm excited to have him on the show here. Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Darren. How about yourself, bud?
I'm good. I'm glad.
Yeah, thanks for having me have you with you today. So looking forward to it.
No, likewise. Kevin, before we get running down the tracks here, if you could do myself and listeners a favor and tell us a little bit about your background in real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my entry into real estate was somewhat of an accident. It's been a blessing now that it happened, but it wasn't really planned out. It wasn't something that I had aspired to be since a little boy. And I was just a really bad student in high school. Didn't really have much of an interest in going away to college. I had a lot of friends that went away to college. I went and visited them at school and partied with them, but wasn't really that good of a student. Knew I would have wasted my parents' money, and so I just went to community college. Graduated high school, went to community college, and was attending bar part time, just having fun. I was 19. Didn't really have a care in the world, but also didn't have any direction either. And was just very fortunate enough to, I was dating a girl and was introduced to her mom's boyfriend at the time. And long story short, he was a local real estate investor. He was like 20 years my senior. And whatever it was, I'm not sure, Darren, maybe he saw some kind of lost, misdirected kid or something. But I mean, I didn't realize it at the time, but he kind of put himself in my life on purpose. And, our friendship flourished for, a couple months. We got to know each other a little bit and just hung out. We enjoyed a lot of the same things. And he was always over at the house that I was at because I was hanging out with my girlfriend. And he was hanging out with her mom. So he invited me to a boot camp, a 3-day boot camp down in Philadelphia. I'm from Pennsylvania. And this boot camp was about fixing and flipping single-family homes. And he was primarily a single-family guy, mostly for long-term cash flow. He did do some flips, but he owned some smaller multifamily as well in the town where I was from. And so anyway, I went to that boot camp with him, and what happened in that boot camp was very transformational for me, more so from a life standpoint than just saying, hey, like I want to do real estate. It was more of there's people here that are making a ton of money. I had the opportunity to meet a lot of people over that weekend, and a lot of people that I felt weren't any smarter than I was. I mean, that was the big revelation. It was like, gosh, if these guys, I don't even know what they're talking about here. I have no idea. I'd never read a book on real estate. I don't even know what they're talking about. Don't even know where to start. Didn't have a construction background. Don't know how to find these opportunities. Don't even know how to evaluate one. But if these guys can do it, some of these guys I met, I'm like, I can figure out how to make some money doing this. And so I left there with the intent of becoming a real estate investor. Didn't know how yet, but I was going to become a real estate investor. And so I knew that the quickest path would be to let David was became my mentor. He was the individual that took me to this boot camp. If I could get him to mentor me, and so I just basically said, hey, I need help. Like I want to do this. I'm excited. You piqued my interest. Like you did the job correctly. You took me to boot camp. You piqued my interest, and so but I need help now. And I think he knew that was going to happen. And he's like, well, I'm always on appointments. I always need help. I could always use an extra hand. If you want, why don't you just come start in between classes, and when you're not working, just come work on my home office with me, or come to the appointments with me, and I'll show you what I do. And that's what happened. Literally for a year, I helped him out everywhere I could, and I attended every meeting I possibly could with him. Got involved in some of the conversations, got involved in dealing with some of his like collections and collecting rent and making deposits. I mean, just literally was like his assistant. I mean, for a year. And learned everything I could about the business before I bought my first property. So I had just turned 20 years old, bought my first single-family home, really run down, beat up, rough, scary place. Didn't know any better, but that's what I bought. And that was kind of the jumping off point for me of my real estate investing career. So 20 years old, bought my first property, bought many more to come after that, hundreds of single-family homes, and I had acquired close to 400 apartment doors. And then lost pretty much everything I'd worked for in 2008. I mean, the crash hurt me really bad down here in Florida, and I took a couple years off, Darren. I stepped away from real estate, focused on a couple other businesses I was involved in, and didn't really want to think anything about real estate. And jumped back in 2010, 2011 timeframe, and started focusing on multifamily. I knew that's what I wanted to do, and was introduced to mobile home parks, which is what we're in today. And it was an interesting time because I thought I was going to be a multifamily guy. I knew that's how I wanted to scale again in my business. And I was introduced to this unique niche, which is what we're in today. And that's all we focused on now. So like we are 100% mobile home park investors. That's all we invest in. That's all we look at on a daily basis. And I've been doing it now for close to 5 years. So that's kind of the real quick condensed story of me. So I've been a full-time investor since the age of 20, and I'm 38 today. So.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. One of the questions I have is, how do you view things differently? I mean, maybe the question should be about just how did the blow up shape your view of things? Because you said how many doors? 400 plus 100.
Yeah, right. I had just under 400 doors of apartment units, and I had 122 single family homes when the market decided to take a nosedive. And it wasn't the apartment doors. Actually, the apartments survived the downturn, and the single family homes didn't. And I thought I was a cash flow investor, even in the single family homes, and we did. We never over leveraged anything. We had our model. We were really strict to our model of buying single family homes. We wouldn't pay more than 65 cents on the dollar, and that was factoring in repairs and rehab costs. But taxes and insurance in Florida were just horrific, and the little bit of cash flow that we did make on a monthly basis was just it was minimal. I mean, it was so minuscule that really, when you look back at our business, we were investing for appreciation. I mean, on our balance sheet, our financial statements looked amazing. I mean, we had a ridiculous amount of equity, and they were, the values were growing substantially each and every year. But what happened is, where we owned a lot of our properties here in Southwest Florida, there was a lot of speculative builders, tons of them, building rooftops for a population that wasn't coming. That was back in the day when literally there would be a contract on a brand new build before it was even finished. It would have been flipped 4 times for profits. Wow. I mean, that was happening down here. I mean, it was ridiculous. And so what happened was there's thousands of single family homes that were brand new, 322s, and a lot of the markets where we owned homes. And when the market started going down, a lot of these builders that had construction loans, they started renting these homes out, the ones that were finished. And they started renting them out for the same or less of what we were renting our older homes for. And so we had a really unique situation where we had a very big loss of occupancy in a short period of time, which basically crushed the little bit of cash flow that we had. And we had to start making concessions to get units rented and had to start dropping our rates. And so not only did our values basically go kaput, I mean, we literally lost every ounce of equity we had within a matter of a year and a half. It was gone. And now I'm talking like our average loan to value on our portfolio of single family homes was under 60%. It was gone. Like those things were upside down in a year and a half. And so just to kind of put the nail in the coffin, now we no longer had cash flow. In fact, we were negative cash flowing, and we were having to write checks every month to basically pay our mortgages. And so it was just a really bad time in single family, at least in the areas where I had the homes. And I couldn't hold on. So I mean, if I could have held on for 5 years, I would have come. I mean, the values are back to where they were before. I probably would have been fine. I probably would have come out okay, but I would have been feeding that animal for many, many years to come. And so the interesting thing is that we didn't see the same. We lost some occupancy in the apartment buildings, but nothing like in the single family. So I'm not sure if maybe those homes were just targeted, like the neighborhoods we owned in were targeted more, or if just people that rent single family homes, or the people that rent single family homes, the people that rent apartments, or people that rent apartments. I'm not sure what happened, but our apartment buildings survived. And so they obviously lost valuation because cap rates changed. I mean, so they weren't necessarily worth the same amount, but they supported themselves. Single family homes did not. And so really, I can't tell you what I would have done differently looking back, because there were many smarter people than myself that ran into the same struggles.
Yeah, no, you were not alone there. It was nationwide and ugly everywhere. So.
I mean, the thing that I would have done differently, Darren, is I would have focused on my apartments. We should have just stopped buying single family homes many years prior to that and focused on buying more apartments and truly being a cash flow investor. I mean, today, that's all we focus on is the cash flow. Like, I want to know what my real cash on cash returns are with real debt in place, and how that thing's going to weather any kind of storm. And we always buy value add stuff, and so we like to foresee equity, and we like to know that there's a back end reward. But if that back end reward doesn't happen, it's not going to be the end of the world for us, because we know that we are making substantial returns month in, month out on what we buy. So that's really what's changed in our business. Like, we only focus on the front end, like what's real. what money is actually going in our pocket today and what money is spendable. Forget about the profits on the back end. Oh, we want them there. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But it's not required. It's not required.
Yeah, no, I'm curious, when you were in the single family, I mean, it sounds like you guys were clearly buying right. And, but even in that model, like you said, you were making just a little bit, on each door kind of thing. And because I know even in my single family stuff, it's more of I can look at it from an appreciation standpoint. And right now values are up, so it's fun to look at the balance sheet and say, wow, look at this.
Yeah.
You know? But,
I remember those days. It used to be a wonderful thing to look at that.
But, as a month in, month out cash flow thing, if you have a vacancy, somebody moves out and you got to turn a unit, I mean, and then trying to borrow money right now with the, what's it, the Dodd-Frank stuff.
Yep.
I mean, I was trying to do a little refi here, not even a year ago, but holy crap! I mean, I was just shocked at the amount of paperwork that they needed and how they've now changed the appraisal game and how nobody in the loop understood a rental that I was dealing with from a standpoint of. Well, I can't say nobody, but they were all just shocked that because I had a unit that I had a tenant there for 15 years and they moved out and I had to spend, a bunch of money to turn the unit. And they were like shocked, like, oh my God, you're losing your butt on that unit. And I was like, do you understand they were there for 15 years?
Yeah, that's unheard of.
And I was like, yeah, so it was, anyway, as opposed to going into a commercial bank and you can, show them the project and show them the numbers and if they like the cover ratio and Tuesday at the loan committee, they'll call you and say, hey, guess what? You got the loan. So
yeah. Completely different ball game. So
yeah. So anyway, I want to, I guess you mentioned the mobile, or not the mobiles, you mentioned the apartments, how well they did. But that's not mobile homes. How'd you end up in the mobile homes?
Yeah, so I mean, as I'd mentioned, I took a couple years away from real estate, and I had two other businesses I had started completely opposite end of the spectrum of real estate, and but I knew that I still had a passion for it. I knew that in order for me to get to where I wanted to be, I need to get back into real estate. I mean, the businesses I had were fun. They got my mind off of what had happened, and they revolved around health and fitness, which I really enjoy. It's a big part of my life, but it just wasn't real estate. So I kind of really started my, I don't know, it's probably late 2010, 2011. I started call it my research. I started talking to everyone that was currently in the multifamily space. Like the game had changed from the crash to 2010, 2011 in terms of financing that was available, what kind of opportunities are on the market, and just what was happening in the different markets, like which markets were recovering faster and such. And so I just spent many months, probably 6 to 8 months, just literally talking to people, reaching out on LinkedIn, having lunches, just finding out exactly how the business had changed and how I was going to get into it. And during that time, I was introduced to the mobile home park space. And I didn't really have any interest in it. I mean, I knew what they were, but I didn't know anything about the investment class, and had never evaluated one and had never really thought of it. It just never crossed my mind. But had a lunch 2 hours after that lunch, or that lunch was 2 hours. And after I left that lunch, I basically said, I'm going to give the next year focused on mobile home parks. Like there was enough things that were told to me in that lunch meeting from an operator, from someone that was in the business, that piqued my interest enough to where I knew that it was at least worth focusing on to find out, was it real or was it just was it false information he was giving me? Like, can I really get the returns he was talking about? Are there really the unique barriers to entry in this niche? And is it really still a very fragmented industry? And is it an industry that has a lot less competition than the multifamily space? And so that's what I did. I went on a mission to learn everything I could about it. And so here we are today, however many years later. I stuck with it, and that's what we focus on. So.
Well, and I guess the question that kind of comes to mind, and actually there's a bunch of questions that come to mind. Mm-hmm. You mentioned kind of the numbers and the barriers to entry. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear a little bit about the barriers to entry into the mobile home park space.
Well, the unique barrier to entry with mobile home parks is that it's the only commercial asset class that has a diminishing supply, meaning that they were going away faster on a yearly basis than they're being built. In fact, I mean, I don't. No one knows the exact number of how many get permitted each year to be built, but it's a very small number. And there's a lot that were built maybe 50, 60 years ago that they're on grounds now that have higher and better use, and so they're being torn down by developers. Some just have aging owners that age out of them. They just kind of let them go downhill and they shut down. And so there's a diminishing supply. And not only that, again, they're not being built because local municipalities don't like these things. These things have gotten a bad name. There's lots of bad operators out there that don't do a good job. They basically run slum parks, that are just full of drugs, sex, and rock and roll. And municipalities don't want them, and so they've got a bad image attached to them, and so permits typically aren't issued. I mean, you could probably, if you wanted to go in like rural Alabama and build a park, you probably could. But if you wanted to build one in Birmingham and city limits, you never would be able to get a permit to do that. And so that's the unique barrier to entry, is that we can buy a park in a phenomenal market that has a high demand for affordable housing and never, ever have to worry about a competitor buying a piece of land down the road and building a park. So I thought that was pretty interesting, which in apartment space, like right now, I'm in Tampa Bay area, they're coming out of the ground left and right. At some point in time, that's a game of hot potatoes. Someone is going to be left holding the bag because these things have a deal cycle of like 3 years from the time permits get issued to the time these things are actually erected and finished. I mean, it's a 2 to 3 year process. And so if the market turns at any point in time, or if it becomes oversaturated, it's kind of a race. Who can get them out of the ground fast enough, get them sold off to an institutional buyer, right? And at some point, there's going to be a oversupply. We don't really have to worry about that in mobile home parks.
Right. No, and then the apartment, kind of the mom and pop apartments, are going to be competing like you were in your single family back in the day. When the market turns, is the brand new product's going to be priced at their price, and
they're going to start offering concessions, get them filled up. Brand new A-class units are going to be giving away free screen TVs and 3 months of free rent. And guess who's going to suffer? It's going to be the B class and the C class, because everyone's going to have to cut their rates to match one another. I mean, it's going to be a game of undercutting. Who's got deeper pockets to basically to support themselves through the downturn if and when it occurs.
Right. No, and I think the only thing that I would kind of shadow that with or shade that with is that in a correction, because presumably an oversupply is kind of a sign of a correction. And I am not an economist, so let me clarify that. I'm not an economist, but I'm just kind of looking at, some of the characteristics of the market when it crashed back in 2008 was this huge oversupply, right? But then at the same time, the money lending had gotten so loose to where everybody was getting, easy money. And when the music stopped, there was still a large supply of renters, even though the absorption, it took a little while to absorb those units that were built before, So like you said, if, who knows? Nobody has a crystal ball, but I like what you're talking about, the barrier to entry in your marketplace, and that there's not new ones coming up. I wanted to ask you, as far as markets go, you mentioned municipalities don't like them. Do you tend to look in more of a urban, suburban, metro area, or because growing up, I grew up in Kansas. I don't know if I told you that, but I remember a couple that we'd drive by on the way to my grandparents' house, and they were either like in a floodplain or under power lines, or they weren't exactly they weren't in a
they weren't prime real estate.
And obviously since then I've seen there was one here locally I remember that somebody put in, and it was in some prime ground, and I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years later, the ground was so valuable, they sold the park. It was like, protests that they were selling a mobile home park kind of thing. Because, but anyway, I'm just kind of curious if you can talk to the markets and where you guys look for these.
Yeah. So first and foremost, we're not speculative buyers. And so we're not looking to buy a park because the underlying ground might have a higher value someday. That's just kind of like icing on the cake. If it happens, great. Like we have a parking contract today that probably will have a higher and better use. It's got 3 contiguous parcels, 25 acres, a lot of road frontage. It's in a commercial corridor. And so today, it's probably the highest and best use is a mobile home park still, but maybe sometime in the next 10 to 15 years, since it's close to the interstate exit and lots of other development going on, there might be higher and better use. But again, we're buying it as a park. It supports itself as a park. And then, at the back end, if the reward is, us demolishing the park and building Walmart distribution center, well then, that would just be icing on the cake. So, but the markets that we look for some particular indicators in markets. And markets don't have to be very large at all. In fact, the average metro, and these are really tiny metros, but the average metro we're kind of looking for is about 100,000 population. And we've even looked and own in markets that are smaller than that have a smaller population than that. But really what we're looking for is an area that has a huge demand for affordable housing that is not being met, which is a lot of the U.S. And so that's one of the factors we're looking for. We're also looking for an area that it's got stability, economic stability, knowing that there's jobs. Either the jobs aren't declining, they're either very stable or they're growing. There's new employers coming in. There's places for people to work. And we look for school districts. School districts are another big thing. We want to know that we're in an area that's got a good school district. People that are still in the lower income bracket want to send their kids to good schools. And so really the affordable housing aspect is everything. I mean, median house prices are a big indicator for us. Like we will not buy in an area that typically has less than a $100,000 median home price. Because we do not want to compete with stick-built homes. Like there's some parts of the country that you can go buy a stick-built home for $50,000, $60,000, brand new. And that monthly payment would be competing with our mobile home park. So how are we going to offer affordable housing when affordable housing, is very brand accessible to the market that's there and it's brand new, right? And it's a stick-built home. So we want to know that we're in a market that has got a big barrier for those that are in that lower income bracket, like, less than $36,000 a year household income, to find a place to live, affordable to live. So those are just some of the basic parameters that we're looking for. I mean, we prospect basically the eastern half of the United States. There are a few states that we really don't touch much in, like Louisiana, Mississippi. Those are two big ones that just very poor states. There are a few individual markets in those states that we would consider buying in if we found the right opportunity, but we tend not to put a lot of effort or interest in those states. And then there's a few other ones as well that we really don't focus much on. And for example, like up in the New England states, there's lots of rural areas up there, and there's a few states up there that aren't very landlord friendly. And so, but other than that, we're pretty much eastern seaboard, over to the basically the Mississippi. Call that the drawing line down the middle of the state, and that's where we focus. That's our markets.
Let's see, I had a couple of notes here I wanted to look at. When you guys buy a park, and I've got a couple of clients that have owned parks, and it seems like a lot of times they come with mobile homes, meaning that the park owns a couple of homes and stuff.
Correct.
Is that common? Do you usually find that is the case? You end up with a couple, or?
Yeah, some of our parks have more than others. I think to date in our portfolio, we literally only own one park that has absolutely zero park-owned homes in it. And we acquired it that way, and we acquired it in the last year. And so we haven't accumulated any homes, but we're actually bringing it's got seven or eight empty pads in that park, empty lots. And so we are bringing homes in to infill those empty lots. And so we will own those homes until we sell them off. And so there's a chance that if we don't sell them as fast as what we intend, one or two might get turned into rentals. So it's not our intent. We don't really like the rental business, but it's a necessary evil of being a mobile home park investor. Those that want to get in this business because they want to eliminate all the tenants, the toilets and the trash, or whatever the
Right.
big three things are that are associated with tenants, is you probably should find a different business, because although there are many parks out there that are just all lot renters and you don't own any homes, you got to be prepared to own one or more at some point in time, because people pass away. The heirs don't want their homes, or people have to move. They can't afford to move their home, and you don't want that thing leaving the park. And so being a park owner, you might buy it and then turn around and try to sell it. So there's many different ways that you accumulate the homes. So, but I don't know how many. We probably own a couple hundred at this point in time throughout the various parks that we own. I don't know the exact number, but we're always focused on lowering that number. And so we have a sales process in place at every single community that we own, to where we actually have trailers where we're trying to sell them off either on very cheap cash prices. We don't look to make a profit on them. We just want to find a good long-term renter that's going to pay lot rent. We'll do a rent credit or rent to own type program. We'll be very creative to help get those things off our maintenance books, because we don't want to maintain the ACs, the roofs, the plumbing, everything that comes along with the rental itself. I mean, owning the park, we maintain the infrastructure, which is much easier than dealing with the tenants themselves that abuse these units.
Right.
So, and then on top of that, the benefit of it is when you have a lot renter, the turnover rate is much lower. Once they own that home, that becomes probably their most valuable asset that they have. And so you find that the turnover and the move rate is very low in comparison to those that are actually in the park just as renters. And it's very expensive to move these homes. It's upwards of $3,000 to $4,000 just to move a single wide, and that doesn't factor in the cost to actually reset it back up in its new location, which can mean leveling it, tying it down, getting utilities hooked up, so on and so forth, skirting the bottom of it. I mean, you could easily have $8,000 wrapped up into moving and resetting a single wide home. And so many people that live in mobile home parks, they never ever have that type of money to their name. At least not the kind of parks that we own, which are just good, hardworking, blue collar folks. And so we like getting them to the park, and not to digress here, but our goal, again, is just to get it to a tenant-owned home status to where they just pay lot rent. That way our turnover is very low, our expenses are very low, and it's a much smoother sailing ship.
Right. Hey, I wanted to circle back. There was a point you were making about affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And typically when I hear the phrase, it kind of rings the Section 8 / HUD housing kind of a thought. Is any of that in play? Is there any Section 8? Because I'm trying to think on. Go ahead.
There's actually, we don't. I believe we do have a few Section 8 residents in a few of our parks, only because we acquired them that way. They were already there, and but Section 8, they've just. I don't know if the new laws in place or new rules are in place, but it's going to be at the point here, either it is now or it's going to be soon, to where someone can use a Section 8 voucher in a mobile home park and can apply that monthly voucher to actually buying a home, which was never the case before. They just had a strictly rent. And so it's going to allow us, we will focus on Section 8 at that point in time, because it will allow us to basically offer a rent-to-own type scenario, creative financing scenario to a Section 8 person that truly does want to own their own home. And it's basically a government-backed rent-to-own home tenant that, our typical default rate on our rent-to-own program it's probably upwards of 30 to 40%. It's pretty high, just because they're renters by nature, and they think they want to be a homeowner, but when it really comes down to it, they typically fall out of the program because they realize they have to actually fix things, and it costs money to do that. But if we've got this government-backed program that will allow them to actually become a homeowner, to where we know that it's a guaranteed payment each and every month, it's a beautiful thing. And I think it will work really well for helping people, basically get off the reliance of the government of, them paying for their housing, because once they own it, the government it'll actually lower the amount that Section 8 has to pay, because once they own that home, it'll basically go down just to the lot rental portion, which most of our parks is under $300 a month. So I think it's going to be a big game changer for our industry.
Yeah, no, actually, as you say that, declining balance owed for the government on those things, as
absolutely.
opposed to the on and on. That's interesting.
Yeah, right now it's just a never-ending hamster wheel.
Yeah.
As far as Section 8 vouchers are concerned. So I think that it's a very intelligent move on the government's behalf. And I think that it will benefit everyone. It will benefit the government. It will benefit mobile home park owners, as well as the those that are on the voucher program that truly have the desire to be a homeowner one day. Right.
What are the characteristics of a park? Obviously there's the units, but is there, and you mentioned the infrastructure, are we talking roads, plumbing, electric? What all do you guys have in a park?
Yeah. So typically you got some common ground, which could mean, just like an entrance area to a park. Some of our parks have like offices, like they have dedicated offices. So there's like a structure for an office. A few parks might have like a community clubhouse. Again, just really depends on the location, the demographic that it's serving. But really, just the thing that's common amongst all the parks is the infrastructure itself. So you've got road maintenance, you've got water and sewer line upkeep, and that's generally it. Other than the common area space, it's if you don't own any of the homes in a park, it should be very, very low upkeep as far as the park owner is concerned. There's not too many things that you can really defer maintenance on. Water and sewer lines are pretty simple. We get backups every so often in our parks. We got to get Roto-Rooter in. We'll get water. Water leaks are probably the biggest culprit. That just happens. As water lines get older, they spring leaks, and so that's one of those things that you've got to stay on top of. But other than that, it's pretty easy going. Really, the park-owned homes, the rental trailers are the things that really throw the wrench into the mix.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in speaking to the expenses, I think in just general terms, when I think of like a multifamily property, I can somehow deduce what the value is in relation to rents and expenses. Just quick math, I would somewhere between 40 and 50% of rents is what you'd expect for expenses. How does that translate in parks? Do you?
Yeah, there's a pretty large range, and so like in a best case scenario, it would be where you own none of the homes. It's city water, city sewer, so it's a water source and a sewer source supplied by the city. It's billed directly to the residents from the city, so that the park owner is not involved in any of the billing or collections of the utilities. And it's got very little common area. Tenants maintain their own lawn, so you don't have a lawn care bill each and every month. So, like in a best case scenario, in most parts of the U.S., you could probably expect to run somewhere in like the 30 to 33% expense ratio. Some people might argue and say they can run them less. I just had a park sent my way the other day, and the guy's telling me it's running at a 27% expense ratio, and I think he's crazy because I've never seen it in my life, and I don't think it's possible. So about 30% is kind of a good rule of thumb of like a best case scenario that you might expect. Now on the other end of the spectrum, you have a park that has a lot of park-owned rentals. It might have private utilities, meaning like might have septic systems. It might have a well. It might have a on-site treatment plant for the sewage, which is you have to have a licensed operator to run. There's upgrades that are typically going to be required on a regular basis. And so on the other end of the spectrum, you might be looking at as high as a 55 or 60% expense ratio, depending on how old the park is, how it's been maintained over the years, what kind of tenant base you have there. Obviously, there's worse and there's better tenant bases. Some are a little bit harder on things than others. And so I'd say in a worst case scenario, you'd be looking upwards of 55, 60%. So there's a very, very big range there. I'd say most of our parks probably fall. And my partner's in the other room here, but he probably knows a little bit better than I, but I think we're probably somewhere in like the 40 to 45% range if we averaged out everything that we own today. That's probably where we would fall.
Got it. You mentioned average rent space 300-ish. Is that?
Yeah, I mean our lowest park today is in Kentucky, and we're still low under market on that one. We've been working to bring it up because when we bought it, it was like it was about $100 below the market, and so that one is $195 a month, which is very, very inexpensive. It should be probably about $230 or $240, which is still very inexpensive. And then the highest lot rents that we have to date, I believe, are $350. And so I'd say most of them fall somewhere in between like the $250 and $300 range a month. And there's parts of the country. I just looked at a park the other day in New Hampshire, and the lot rents in that market are over $500 a month. Parks up in the northeastern states are typically a lot more expensive as far as lot rent are concerned. But I'd say the national average is probably somewhere in the $300 range a month.
Got it. Talking on expenses management, do you have on-site management or?
We do.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And is that is that an employee or is that a resident of the park, or how do you?
If we can find when we go into a new park, if part of the system that's broken is the on-site management, then we intend to basically replace them. Sometimes we've kept the same management because that wasn't really a part of the broken part of the system. But just a general rule of thumb is we can find someone, if we need to replace a manager, we can find them inside the park. We'll look for someone that's got the pride of ownership of their home, maybe like a retired person that's got some computer skills that could communicate effectively, someone that's responsible. It'd be great to find someone within that park because they already know the residents. They kind of know the park itself. They live there for a while. I'd say more times than not, for us, if we have to replace a new manager or bring a new manager in, we typically will find them on Craigslist. We very rarely, most of the parks we buy are distressed, and so we rarely find residents that are in the park today that we would feel comfortable putting them in the position of manager because they're probably part of the problem.
Right.
And so a lot of times we'll just find someone on Craigslist, but we do require that they'll move there. So like they can't live off site. They have to move there, and we typically provide free housing. We'll normally dedicate a trailer in the park, a mobile home, or if that park came with like a single family home. A lot of parks have single family homes on the premise. We'll give them free housing, free utilities, and also pay them a monthly salary. And then there'll be on top of that, there'll be like if there's park or homes that need sold in the park or homes that need leased, there'll be commissions on top of that as bonuses. So
Got
like
it.
the general rule of thumb, again, it varies depending on how big of a turnaround a park might be. Like some of our parks are bigger projects than others, but the general rule of thumb is about $10 per lot per month as far as the salary is concerned, plus free housing.
Okay. Seems manageable from a cost expense there. What is there a target size of a park that you guys look for? Or?
Yeah, we find that we really hit our stride, and that there's we start realizing some scales of economy at about 50 spaces, 50 to 60 spaces. We will consider smaller parks if they're in areas where we might own another park nearby. For example, we own a park in Pennsylvania. We're in contract with another, and there's one that just came across my desk yesterday that it's 40 spaces. It's a really nice looking park, well maintained. It's in a good area. It's an hour away from our next closest park. And much smaller than like if that's the only thing that we were looking at and that's the only thing that we were about to own in Pennsylvania, we wouldn't consider it. But being that we're going to have some other parks in the area, we would buy it. So 40 is about probably the threshold. I probably wouldn't buy anything less than 40, but normally we're looking between 50 and 60. And the sweet spot for us tends to be probably like in the 80 to 100 space range. That's like the sweet spot. We're at that size. We're kind of underneath the radar of the bigger players like the REITs and the institutional guys. And we're a little bit above the local single-family home investor that thinks he wants to buy a mobile home park. So and there's a lot of competition in the space we're in, but we've got, if you have capital and you can be nimble and you know what you're doing, there's still a lot of good opportunities left. And so we find that space works really well for us. So
finding the opportunities, are you guys going online, or do you have brokers bring them, or how are you?
Yeah, obviously there's sites like LoopNet. There is a dedicated website that's called mobilehomeparkstore.com. It's basically the MLS for mobile home parks. The challenge with both of those sites is with LoopNet, I call it the trash can for brokers. I mean, most things that end up on LoopNet have already been shopped a million times. Not saying that we haven't ever bought a deal off LoopNet. In fact, a park that we have in contract today is off of LoopNet, which is it's like the first one in like 3 years. One of the parks we own, we bought on LoopNet. It was a phenomenal purchase. So you can find opportunities on LoopNet, but for the most part, things that make it to LoopNet are just they're a waste. Either they're overpriced or they've got some other kind of challenges that are associated with them. I'm not saying you shouldn't comb through them, and then the mobile home park store, it's kind of the same thing. A lot of things that make it there have been combed through already, or the company that owns Mobile Home Park Store, they're actually very large park investors themselves, and so they basically cherry pick things before they ever make it to the market.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I'll take this one and that one.
Yeah. No. I mean, which is smart. I mean, I think
Sure.
It's brilliant. I think it's a brilliant business. I don't shame them for that at all. I think it's brilliant. But so that means that the things that finally make it there are things that they own in like 30 different states. They turned it down for a reason. They didn't have an interest. So most of the things that make it there aren't that great either. But that leaves you with either brokers or going direct to market yourself. And we have found the best luck with going direct to market. So we spend a lot of time, put a lot of emphasis on building our database out. So we do a lot of market analysis in certain individual markets. And we basically have a database that's of thousands now of every single park in those individual markets, the size of it, when it was bought, basically what they paid for it, the owner's age, the owner's home phone number, the owner's cell phone number, the owner's home mailing address. And we basically call them, we mail them, we call them again, we mail them again, and we beat them up until
they surrender.
Until they surrender. Yeah. We have bought from brokers. What I have found with brokers, especially in the part of the real estate cycle that we're in today, where there's way more buyers and sellers, there's some industry-specific brokers that are in the space, very large groups that all they specialize in mobile home parks. Is even with us, like we're experienced operators, but we're low on the totem pole as far as size goes, and it's really hard to get their attention. And I don't like begging for deals, and so you'll find that the stuff that they send you has already been picked over by like their top 10 buyers. I mean, I'm just throwing out a number, but it's already been picked over by their buyers that they've worked with for many years, and by the time it makes it down the chain, everyone's passed on it. It's probably junk. It's overpriced, or it's not a great opportunity. And so we just go direct. We've gotten really good at going direct, not to owners, and just building relationships. I mean, most people we talk to, they're maybe not ready to sell today, but we put them in our CRM and we continually follow up, because it's all about timing, right? I mean, there's always going to be a day when either someone needs or wants to sell. And I want to be in front of that person. I want my name in their mind when that day comes. And so that's what we do.
Right. No, that is the secret to marketing, is top of mind when they're ready to buy or sell or move. Hey, tell me quick, what's the best deal that you guys have come across that you're most proud of, that just stands out in your mind? It's like, wow, this one was a win.
Yeah, we got a bunch of them. Most
good.
of our parks are just, I don't even because a lot of parks in our portfolio are just, if I don't even want to mention the cash on cash returns we get there. It's crazy, but I'll give one that's just, it's been an absolute home run for us. We bought it, I guess about a year and a half ago. It was in Richmond, Virginia area. It had been owned by the same owner for like 32 or 33 years. He was a litigation attorney, had a huge practice, a very smart businessman, but wasn't a very smart mobile home park owner. He wasn't on site there. He had on-site management, and he kept the park up. He spent a ton of money maintaining this park. It looked really nice. It was smaller, 52 spaces in size, and but the guy, he let his managers have free will spending his money on this park, and so it looked beautiful, but this thing made no money. It grossed $250,000 a year, and like his NOI the year we bought it was like $28,000. Just ridiculous with the expenses. And so we technically overpaid for it when we bought it. It should have really, based on the cap rate, if you really want to talk about just NOI, it really should have sold for like $300,000, which we knew was worth way more than that, and we knew that we could fix the problems, because the problems were just giving the managers free will to hire a bunch of people and spend a ton of money on this park, instead of doing the work themselves, because they just sat back in their office chair and delegated all this stuff out to people. And so we paid $650 for it, and we very quickly, so we basically bought it on a 5 cap, which is overpaying, but we very quickly, in a matter of a couple months, turned it around to what would have been effectively like a 15 cap on the purchase. And to date, that park is, I think in 2016, NOI was $162,000. So went from $28,000 to $162,000 very, very quickly. And I think that one is so we put on, so basically darn near close to 100% cash on cash return. I think we put 25% down when we purchased it. Yeah, is that the right number? I think 25% down when we purchased it. And now it's today, like in that market, it's a really good market. We probably could turn around and sell it for 1.6, 1.7, somewhere in that range. So we basically added $1 million of equity without doing much, just running it correctly.
Wow.
Kept the same management. The management wasn't broken. We thought that was the broken part, but what we found is that the management was really willing to comply with our the new way we wanted to run the park. And there's lots of other little things we fixed. And
Sure.
The management, they turned out to be probably one of the better management teams that we have of all the parks. So yeah, that was, and we've got a couple like that, a couple stories like that, but that one sticks out in my mind just because it was a massive home run, and it's in a phenomenal market. And that thing just cash flows like crazy each and every month. And so that's a good one.
That is a good one. Do you have any opposite end of the spectrum?
Yep, I do.
Yeah, one of those. Sure.
Yeah, but we've never lost. Let me put it this way: we've never lost money on an acquisition. We're extremely diligent with our inspections prior to buying anything, and so we're always looking for we always look for the reasons not to buy. We're like worst devil's advocate. All of us here in our team we're like the worst devil's advocates. It's like, why shouldn't we be buying this? It looks like a great deal on the front end, but what could be possibly wrong? How could we lose money on this thing? And so we bought a park in Pennsylvania, got some incredible owner finance terms on it. 10% down. We're only paying $200,000 for the park. It's like a 41 space park, good area. Put 10%, so $20,000 down. We put another $30,000 into capital improvements, just trimming trees and cleaning up some debris here and there. And that park it was on county water, and it had a master septic system at the back of the park. So the big septic field served the entire park. We did phase ones, did septic inspections. We knew the septic was older. We knew that there was a prior point in time where it would fail, and we knew that we knew we had a backup. The county water connection was at the front of the park, so it was the stub was there at the front of the park, and so we knew that our backup was at some point in time when we needed to, we could connect into the county sewer source. We didn't intend it to happen as soon as it did. In our mind, we're like, if we get 5 years, we get 10 years, great, but we'll just plan on it. We're buying it right. We're buying it at the right price. That even if it happened right away, we should be fine. And we did our research to know that there's some grant programs out there to finance these types of infrastructure improvements and such. So we basically we covered all of our bases that we could. Well, the septic ended up failing. We found out actually that the previous owners did some illegal things to the septic system that our septic inspection didn't catch. And the septic system was essentially failed when we bought the park. And so we're being forced, within the first year to connect, which is a very long process, lots of engineering, lots of headaches from the EPA and DEP, and just a pain in the butt all the way around. But once that connection's done, the park will be worth probably 4 times what we paid for it, and it should run smoothly at that point in time. So we knew the gotchas on the front end. We just didn't think they would happen as fast as they did, but we kind of had the backup plan in place and knew how we would address them when they came about. So that's kind of like the worst case. That really is that park. We haven't taken any money out of it. Hasn't cash flowed because we're just basically been setting aside reserves and basically kind of managing what we have right now, spending a lot of money on engineering and such. And so that park has made zero money. It hasn't taken any money out of our pocket, but it has made zero money.
What kind of cost do you expect for a sewer hookup?
The park sits on a slope, and so we got to put a lift station in as well. And the county's going to take the lift station over after we're done building it, so we have to build it to their quality specs. And so with the lift station and all the connections, we're expecting about $300,000. So $100,000 more than what we paid for the park.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you said are there grants available?
There's a low interest rate financing program through the state of Pennsylvania that's 15-year amortization. I think it's 1 or 2% interest rate, and so it's very inexpensive money for that type of improvement. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the game, right?
Again, it's not costing. It's not taking money out of our pocket. It's been a little bit of a headache, but we know that there's an opportunity on the back end. We know that we've got a demand to fill the spaces in. Like, it's got 41 spaces. There's 32 occupied. So there's 9 empty pads that are fully developed. They have hookups there, connections. We can't bring any homes in yet until you'll get the sewer thing worked out. But once it's a 40 space park, once we have 40 or 41 spaces occupied, that park literally will be worth. Conservatively speaking, we could probably turn it around. We'll do some more capital improvements. We'll fix the roads a little bit more as well once we're done doing everything we're doing there. But $800,000-$900,000, and so we'll have $500 into it. It'll actually be a very very nice cash return based on the underlying financing we have in place, both on the first lien holder as well as this government grant program. And so the cash on cash should be nice, and we'll have a very nice kicker on the back end. So the financing terms we got were basically 10% down, 30-year amortization, 10-year balloon, 5% interest rate, and I think we got 4 months of deferred payments when we bought it. So the financing was it's very cheap. I think our monthly payment's like $1,000 a month on the loan. So it's not too hard to actually cover our expenses in that park.
Oh, that's great, especially with a big expense like that on the right out of the chute. That's huge.
Yeah, so that's one of the things about this business. Like in that park there, that park could have easily drowned somebody. Like the wrong buyer coming in that didn't do their due diligence or didn't know like what their backup plan could be, and they came there like, you know what, I got $50,000 instead of buying a single family home. I'm going to buy this park because the lady will do it for $20,000 down, and it's going to be beautiful because here's what my cash flow is going to look like. It's going to be a wonderful thing. And they get into it and they find out they've got to dump another $300,000 into it, but yet they hadn't researched the program. They couldn't afford to hire like a environmental attorney, which we did. They couldn't afford those things or didn't want to spend the money. That would sink their ship pretty quickly. Like a deal like that. And there's a lot of parks out there that have infrastructure issues or soon to be infrastructure issues that we see pop up all the time on the internet. Like, failed septic system, it's being shut down by the county, or a failed lagoon system, which is like a private sewer plant of the well, is basically contaminated, and there's no county water source nearby. So like different things like that could literally force you to shut your investment down, force you to shut the park down and lose all your money. So.
Kevin, are you guys buy and hold, or do you guys have kind of an exit strategy when you get in? Or?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is that we are buy and hold because in my mind, they're not making any more of these things, right? And so when we find good opportunities that are in good markets that can provide us the cash flow that we need as well as, to provide our investors as well, what's the point of selling? We don't have unlike a lot of apartment guys, like they do syndications and such, like they almost have to sell in a 3 to 5 year window to get the returns that their investors are looking for, because their cash on cash is pretty pitiful, in those first 5 years. So for us, that's not really the case. I mean, these things provide substantial returns on an annual basis, and there's not really a force for us to sell them. Like, we don't have to exit out of them to get the returns that we're looking for. And so we're long-term holders. I mean, if someone came along and wanted to pay us double what something was worth, then everything's for sale at the right price.
Right.
But we buy with the intent of holding for a long time. And there's more and more. This industry is becoming less and less fragmented each and every day, and so there's more professional operators like ourselves that are coming into the space. And so there's a point in time to where, I'm not going to say that all the opportunities will be gone, because even if you're a professional operator, it doesn't mean you're going to do a good job running that investment. But we're buying a lot of our parks from mom and pops that were either the original owners or like secondhand owners, and they're aging out of these things. And so a lot of those mom and pops haven't done a great job of maximizing the value of these properties. So they haven't raised rents in a long time. They haven't been running like a business. Their collections aren't all that great. And so there's still a lot of opportunity there for us to go in and basically just add a significant amount of value and buy these parks at a really good price. And so once we buy them, once other professional operators buy them, now there's not going to be really a lot of meat left in the bone for the next guy to come along. And so if we sell, we got to buy something else, right?
Right.
So why would we sell? Because they're hard enough to find. And so in our mind, like, why would we sell if we got to go turn around and buy something else to replace that income stream?
Got it.
So
we're kind of running on here, and I want to be respectful of your time. I got a couple of quick wrap-up questions here.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the best advice you would give to somebody that's considering getting into mobile home parks?
Get the education. I mean, I just mentioned a deal in Pennsylvania that literally on the front end looks like a phenomenal deal. You can run all your projections, you can put it on your spreadsheet and see how great of a cash on cash return that deal would be, and not realize that there's a massive skeleton that's just lingering in the closet that could completely wipe you out, both in that investment as well as your personal finances. I mean, that if someone took recourse on that deal and it fell apart, they're going to lose their primary residence. They're going to lose their own personal worth. I mean, so get your education. There's a couple sources out there. We offer education. This isn't a pitch for our education, but find someone that either can teach you how to do the business, bring a mentor on, go spend some money on education, but just get properly educated so that you know exactly what's a good opportunity and what's a bad opportunity, and how to quickly filter through the good from the bad. I mean, because really there's a lot of bad stuff out there, Darren. There's lots of junk that's on the marketplace that can be, you can put lipstick on things and you can make them look a little better. And if to a trained eye, I can still see the ugly pig underneath, but to someone that's brand new and fresh, all they're going to look at is the marketing package and the beautiful numbers of how this thing's going to perform. And they see the nice little lipstick on the front end, but they're not going to understand that there's a big ugly pig roaring on the backside.
Right.
That's looking to take their money. So get educated. That's the best advice I can give.
Well, that's good. Hey, I got a question for you. Do you have any idea how many mobile home parks there are in Oregon?
In Oregon, I have no idea, but my partner probably knows, but I have no idea. He's the one that kind of handles our database project. No, I have no clue. Probably a lot. I mean,
I was kind of curious. I don't know if this is a lot or not. I did some Googling last night before this, and there's 1,000, at least on the there's some sort of a state website. I just Googled mobile home parks in Oregon, but it shows 1,073 parks. Does that seem like a lot, or is that?
No, I mean, there's probably about, no one knows the exact number, but somewhere between 50 and 55,000 parks throughout the country. There's some states that have none. I mean, Hawaii has none. There's some states that have very small numbers, but then that sounds about right. I mean, because you have, depending on how they classify mobile home parks. So in Oregon, obviously, there's a lot of probably hybrid mobile home / RV parks. And there's probably also a lot of RV parks as well, because there's a lot of travelers in different parts of Oregon that come through. So same with like Washington State, same with California, same with Florida. So you've got an area that not only do a lot of people live, but also a lot of tourists visit. So I'm not surprised at all that there's more than 1,000 there. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
So you're thinking that some of those might be like your coastal RV park where people are pulling up for,
or they're hybrids. Summer. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I don't know the state website you're looking at and how they classify mobile home from RVs. But some parks are kind of hybrids where they have a permanent component along with an RV component. So depending on how they are classified in the state of Oregon, whether they're zoned as mobile home or zoned as RV, or what kind of license they have to operate that business. So yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe there's many more, maybe there's a couple thousand if you factor in the RV parks. I'm not sure how they classify it there.
Yeah. No, I just thought it was interesting. I hadn't any idea there were so many or that many. I just thought it seemed like a big number compared to what I would have expected.
Yeah.
And
you need to go out and buy one.
There you go. Tune in.
Yeah, or Oregon's an expensive state. If you can find a good opportunity there, grab it.
I think clearly the metro areas are what kind of drive it. I mean, Portland's definitely the leader as far as real estate in that. But I mean, it's
you'd be surprised. The tertiary markets work really, really well in the mobile home park space. I mean, obviously, you have to figure out what the habits are of the residents that you're looking to cater to. And so, like, what is the next closest major market? Where are the jobs? Where are people driving? Like, what, for instance, in Iowa, I like to use Iowa as an example because Iowa is like literally like a state that has little tiny towns everywhere, and they're separated by like 30 miles of cornfields. And it's like that the road from the one town to the next is like one straight shot, and you go 80 miles an hour on it because that's how people in Iowa drive on these country roads. And it's a quick, a 30-mile drive to them is nothing. Like, they'll drive 30 miles because they can get there in less than half an hour to go to the Walmart, to go to the Wells Fargo and things like that. It's a normal part of their daily routine. Whereas 30 miles in Florida, forget about it. It would take you 2 hours. And like, that is not typically how far someone's willing to commute to get to their job or to get to a Walmart, to get to any other type of amenity. And so find out what the habits are, the residents that live in that town. You'll find that there's a lot of smaller areas that aren't even maybe part of a major metro that would still support a solid mobile home park business, meaning like there's still a very high demand for housing, and there's still a high demand for people to live there. And also, those people live there, they commute outside of that town to go to work, to go to school, to go to the shopping sources. So, I mentioned our park in Kentucky, that's all lot renters. That town, Paducah, Kentucky, it's small. I don't know what the population is. It's probably 25, 30,000. I mean, it's not a very large area, and that park does wonderful. And so do all the other parks in that city. I mean, they stay full. And so.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. The tertiary markets, I typically think of them as higher cash flow, higher cap rate markets and stuff, but especially for something like this where somebody has an ownership stake in their housing, you're not going to have the potential vacancy, or I wouldn't think you'd have the turnover like you would maybe in something else, just with that ownership component. So.
I'd say the one big thing that we look for is that's very important to us, and it's not a deal breaker, but we want to know that we hope that there is a Craigslist market either in the town we're buying or very near to where people in that town search on Craigslist, because that's how we lease and sell most of our property or most of our homes that are in our parks. And so if we got vacancies, we fill them typically by relying on Craigslist. And so if it's a park that is 2 hours away from the nearest Craigslist market, well, those people in that town aren't looking on Craigslist because it's 2 hours away, right? And so that might be a little bit more challenging as far as if you've got vacancies, if you're going to buy a park that's a turnaround, maybe it's got major vacancies or occupancy issues, even if it's got a manager in place that you're going to fire and try to find someone new, like, how are you going to advertise for that? Especially if you're a long distance operator. Now, if you're there in the town, the town well, maybe a different story. But
right. You know who needs a place to live, and hey, we've got some here for you. All right. Hey, I've got one last question here, and then we'll ask how to get a hold of you. As an insurance broker, I've started asking all my guests here, what do you think of when somebody says insurance? I mean, mobile home parks, I don't think of them as a. Well, I want to ask you, what do you think of when somebody says insurance with respects to mobile home parks?
What do you mean? Can you clarify a little bit or elaborate a little bit more?
Well, in just more of your business operations with a mobile home park and insurance, is there? I mean, trip and fall? Is there any kind of a?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
It's not
we get general liability, and then we also insure if we own units or we own structures in that park, we insure those structures or the trailers if they're rental trailers. But the park itself has general liability. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's slip and falls, and guys that are mowing the grass that cut their arm off. I mean, there's lots of different things like that you should be concerned about.
No, absolutely. I just typically on a real estate issue, the bank's got all the requirements for insuring the asset from the standpoint of loss, and the bank wants to be made whole. But I'm just kind of thinking more on a mobile home park with basically the ground and the few units. It clearly it doesn't drive the balance sheet as far as an expense like it would on some sort of a larger.
Unless it's a park that has a large number of park-owned homes, then it's a different story. And then also there might be some areas that, if in Florida, if you're like near the coast or on the coast, to where the bank's going to require that you get business interruption insurance. Chance of a hurricane coming through and wiping out half the park, right? So I mean, there's situations like that would require additional insurance coverage more than typical. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, if it's a park that's inland, all lot renters, where you're just basically insuring the infrastructure itself, it's not a large item on the balance sheet.
Got it. Kevin, this has been a lot of fun. What's the
Darren, absolutely.
Thanks for doing this. What's the best way for somebody to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my personal email, it's kevin@kevinbupp.com. They can also go to my personal website, kevinbupp.com. And then as far as mobile home parks are concerned, if they want to learn a little bit more about our company, what it is we do, there's two different places they can reach me. Our investment arm, like the company we actually do our business under, is sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. And then we also have an educational arm, which I had mentioned. It's also where we host our podcast about mobile home park investing. So if someone has an interest in learning that business, first I say go listen to our podcast. They're free, and I think we have like 65 of them up there already. So there's a ton of them, and they're very granular in nature. But they can go to Mobile Home Park Academy, mobilehomeparkacademy.com. So again, three spaces. There are three places they can find me: kevinbupp.com, mobilehomeparkacademy.com, or sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. Depending on what they want to find out and how they want to reach me, there's three ways for them to do it.
Got it. And I'll put all those in the show notes.
Sorry, that's a lot of ways, but I guess it really depends on what they're looking for, right?
Well, and I certainly wouldn't want anybody to forget your real estate investing for cash flow podcast too. I know that's where I found you, and I've been a big fan of that as well. So so they can see all those episodes. I actually host that on kevinbupp.com, and so that's that show is hosted there, so they can listen to previous podcast episodes, and so they can find out everything they need there. And but those other sites are more so if you got someone that has an interest in learning about the business, Mobile Home Park Academy is probably the best place. Or about we take on passive investors as well. We're syndicators, and so Sunrise Capital Investors is our investment arm. So that would be the best place for them to learn more about that. Got it. Well, Kevin, I've enjoyed it, and thanks again for taking the time to do this, and we'll look forward to doing it again soon.
I really appreciate your time, Darren. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much.